Okay, so the plan for tonight, what we're going to start with, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction, just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to hand over to Claire, and Claire's going to talk about, give a bit of an overview of solar, go over some of the basics, and talk about how our Solar Made Easy project and how we can help you if you want to progress with solar. We're then going to hand over to Richard, and Richard's going to talk about his own home system and all of the benefits he's got out of it and how he's really sort of maxed out the use of that system at home. And then what we'll be moving on to is to your questions to the installer. So we'll be putting those to Chloe and to Kieran, and also to Richard if you wanted Richard's perspective, or to Claire if you wanted to ask particular questions about how we can help you. So we'll aim to leave lots of time for that to take all your questions. Okay, so just a quick introduction to CAF. Some of you might know us already, but if this is the first time you've come across us, just to let you know that we are Cumbria's climate change and sustainability organisation, and we are a charity. Our vision as a charity is a zero carbon Cumbria, which is socially, environmentally, and economically beneficial for all. And we tend to work at lots of different levels. We do loads of work, like tonight, with homeowners, helping people around home energy. We work with community groups to then encourage sort of climate action at a community level. And we work with larger organisations, with businesses, with local authorities, again, to help that kind of more strategic planning about decarbonising Cumbria. And our aim is to get there by 2037. So it's quite ambitious. So everything you're doing is really helpful to help get us towards that goal. So we all really appreciate all of your efforts. I wanted to start off with a quote about solar, really. This is an extract from a recent report from the International Energy Agency, which was published earlier on this year. And it said that the power sector investment in solar photovoltaic PV technology is projected to exceed 500 billion US dollars in 2024, surpassing all other generation sources combined, which is just massive. It's massive that it's now the biggest source of power globally. And compared to maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago, where people were still thinking, there's no future in renewables, it's happened, it's there. And it's not just in other places in the world. It works in Cumbria too, absolutely works here, despite the fact that it can be wet and cloudy a lot of the time. It really does produce a lot of energy here. And there are just some examples. There's some really big solar farms that are being developed in Cumbria as well. A list of them here, one in Barrow that's now complete, one in Brampton that was approved last autumn. And there's been a recent consultation this year about one near Workington. So if developers think they can make money out of solar and the solar generates a lot of electricity, it's a real indication that it is really worth investing in solar in Cumbria. Just a bit of background on the project. We've been going for quite a while now. We started off with a very small pilot in Ambleside, and since then we've grown and we've worked in lots of other communities around Cumbria. So since 2022, we've worked with 16 different communities all over Cumbria, delivering community events. So it's essentially like this webinar, but in person. And we've had over 450 households attending those events. Out of those 450, 250 households have requested solar quotes, which we've helped them to get through our partner installers, two of which you can see here. We've got two other installers we work with as well. And so far, we've had 63 installations complete, which is brilliant. It's great to see those numbers ramping up, and we're really making an impact now and helping people to get renewables on their homes. Just a few stats. Altogether, that generates about 280,000 kilowatt hours of renewable electricity each year, with an estimated lifetime reduction in carbon over 25 years of about 1,600 tonnes. If that means nothing to you, it's the equivalent of about 800 return flights from Paris to New York. So it's pretty considerable. And the more we continue, the more people get involved, the higher that number will be. Obviously, this webinar is about solar, and that's going to be the focus of it. But before thinking about solar, we just want to make you aware of other things that you can do in your home aside from solar. It might not be the first thing that's the best thing for you. So think about things like energy efficiencies, whether it's kind of smaller scale stuff to do with changing your light bulbs to LEDs, or draft proofing, or improving your temperature controls on your heating, stuff like that. or whether it's the larger projects, the bigger retrofit projects, which could be extra insulation on your walls or your roof or your floor, or it might be about replacing your fossil fuel, your gas or your oil or your coal heating with electric heating, for example. So it might be that if you've got only got a limited budget, it might be that some of these things might be better for you to do first and think about solar later, or it may be that the situation you're in makes absolute sense to go for solar now. So it's just really to make you aware that there are other things to do as well. We're not absolutely just promoting solar as the first thing. If you are interested in the other types of energy efficiency work, we've got various support that we can offer you. So I'm just going to quickly outline that. We've got our Cold to Cozy Home service, which you may have heard of. It's been around for quite a while. It's focusing on those quick wins, those cheap fixes that can really help people to save money on their energy bills and to make their homes more comfortable to live in. There are eligibility criteria for that free service, but it's quite broad criteria. They're listed here. So there's things around vulnerability to do with health or income, but also if you have a child under 16 or if you have people over the age of 65 in your house, you will also be eligible. The full list of criteria is available on our website, so you can check that. And what you can receive as support through that service, it can be an advice call with one of our home energy advisors, or they can come out and visit you as well and work with you in your home to see what you can do to reduce your energy use and reduce your fuel bills. So they can give you advice on things like draft proofing. They have certain we call them easy measures, energy saving kit that they can give you for free, such as LED light bulbs or foils to put down the back of radiators to reflect more heat into the room. They can also help by giving you advice on energy tariffs, and they can also refer you onto other services and give you advice around grant funding as well. Just got a slide here. I'm not intending to go through this because there's an awful lot of detail on it, and we will share these slides after the webinar, but it's just a range of grants that we're aware of at the moment. There might be others. It's quite a changeable landscape and it's quite difficult to keep on top of all of the detail, but these are the ones we're aware of at the moment. A lot of them have eligibility criteria attached to them. Either they're means tested or it's to do with the energy rating of your home. But some of them are available to anybody. So for example, the boiler upgrade grant, which is about replacing your boiler with a heat pump, that's available to anybody. So as I said, I'll send these out, or we'll send them out with the slides so you can have a look through. And as part of the Cold to Cozy Homes visit, you can talk to an advisor in depth about these grant opportunities and they can help you then apply for them. The other thing that we've got this winter, which is an expansion of what we were doing last winter, is that we can offer a free basic thermal imaging survey to anybody in Cumbria. So this is really good sort of awareness raising to point out potential problem areas in your home. So if you're not familiar with thermal imaging, it basically shows up a colour spectrum. Blue is cold, red is warm, very simplistically speaking. So it can show you, for example, if you've got loads of drafts coming through underneath your door, or if you've got a massive patch in your wall, which is blue, and you're thinking, oh, maybe there's a problem with my insulation in that part of the wall. The people that are doing the surveys, it's a mixture of local volunteers in groups such as Richard's group that he works with in Penrith, and also some of our home energy advisors are delivering the surveys. And what they can do is they can give you the pictures. They can't go into the detail of interpreting those images, but they do have quite a comprehensive leave behind sheet to help let you know where you can go for that next step advice on how to deal with the things that have been flagged up. The other service we have at CAFS is our retrofit service. So this is about the big projects. These are the much bigger, more complex work around extra insulation or, for example, changing a heating system. What we tend to start with is a whole house energy audit, which we call the Home Retrofit Planner. And this is Richard, as he mentioned, is one of our HLP assessors. The price, it is a paid for service and it starts at about £680 plus VAT, but we are offering some for free if you meet the Cold to Cozy eligibility criteria. So if you're interested, please do check Cold to Cozy first to see if you're eligible, and then come to us and you might be able to get that report for free at the moment. That's available until the end of March. And then after the home retrofit planner, we have a whole series of different steps that we can then help you with around whether if you might have a cavity wall, we can do a cavity wall survey for you. We can then look at, out of the suggestions in the home retrofit planner, which particular interventions you want to progress with, maybe then looking at design plans you have or giving you standard specifications, giving you some guidance around how to go about getting installers, and then supporting you once you eventually get onto site around talking to your builder and making sure that your retrofit criteria are fully kind of understood, or answering technical questions that you might have. We also have, sorry, just on that one, again, there are some up until the end of January, some of that follow-on support is free. We also have a recorded webinar series called Eco Retrofit for Householders, and the links on the slides, which will come out to you, which will give you loads of information about the basics of retrofit. So I think that's it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Claire, who's going to move now onto solar and talk to you about Solar Made Easy project.
Thanks, Molly. Great to be with everyone here tonight. Just Molly, shall I use your slides and just say, next slide, please, or shall I share my screen? Yeah, okay. So I work in the low carbon communities team with Molly and with Julia Massey, who you may have heard of, who's our project manager for the Solar Made Easy scheme. And I do a lot of the background work on the project. So the point of the project, as it says on this slide, is to support and educate and encourage people to progress with solar PV. We're not here to try and make anyone buy solar. We're just here to help you access free independent advice from ourselves via what were originally quite a lot of community-based live events, in-person events. This is I think the second of our webinars where we've now kind of opened up our support to people across Cumbria at any time to access our support. We've also got maps, so we've mapped some areas of Cumbria in terms of the roof solar energy potential. You'll get to see one of those in just a moment. As you know, we've got a couple of local Cumbrian installers on the panel with us this evening, and these are people who we've done, kind of background checks on and built relationships with over the last couple of years, and we help improve your access to communicating with these trusted installers, and so you have the opportunity to ask them questions such as this evening. Probably important to mention that we don't have a contractual relationship with any of our installers or an income from them. It's purely an introduction service. We don't have a guarantee either of the service. So just a couple of other things to mention before we move on. We want to kind of maximize the efficiency of the installer's time through introducing them to householders. Perhaps they can work in clusters and put installations up in similar locations at the same sort of time. But as I said before, we can now take requests for quotes that we can pass on to installers from anyone at any time within Cumbria. Okay, next slide, thank you. So this is a picture demonstrating one of our maps. So you can see lots of purple blobs on the outlines of roofs. This is an aerial view of a part of Alston Moor. And that little pop-up box that says ID and latitude and longitude, etc., that is hovering over one of those buildings, and it's saying roughly how much energy could come from a solar array, and it's actually saying there's 43 panels that could be placed on that roof. So if you live in a community where we've commissioned a map to literally map the solar potential of the roofs in your area, it's great to have a look at it via our website. Our main page, Solar Made Easy, off the CAF's website. All our maps that we've done for various communities are based there. It's not 100% accurate, but it's a really great guideline. And in addition, we've recently come across a web-based tool where you can literally go to a website, type in your address, and you'll get a similar kind of scenario where it kind of estimates how many panels, what the energy generation will be. It also tells you how much it will cost, but we tend to find the estimated costs are quite high compared to what we have observed so far in Cumbria, but that is called Solar Wizard, and that's been created by Centre for Sustainable Energy, I believe. So yes, another thing to consider. Thanks, Molly. Okay, so how does it work in terms of the Solar Made Easy support? So in addition to the events and the website and the FAQs and the information that we provide, we also, as I mentioned, have this relationship with these local installers, and through that we're able to assist you in accessing quotes from them. And it all starts after you've done some research on our website. If you complete the questionnaire that you'll also find on the website, we can send it to you tomorrow. The questionnaire takes about 30 minutes to fill in, and we get that questionnaire back, plus some aerial shots of your roof, or we can get those for you and check they're correct with you before sending them on. And then we send that on to 2 of our installers. They then contact you directly. They send you the quotes directly. They keep in touch with us as well, because we like to, for our funders, you know, we are funded for this project, so we want to track the outcomes of the project. So we know when they've sent you quotes, and also if you progress to order and then install, we keep in touch to track your journey. And equally, there's absolutely no obligation. So if you don't want to take up the quote, if it's not right for you, no problem at all. But it is good for us to know what you decide, so we can know the impact of our work. And the contact details for the service are all based there on the slide, so you'll get that in the pack. So in terms of solar PV basics, so PV being photovoltaic, this is the name for the panel, the actual kit. So you have this panel that's sort of quite large, sort of meter square, maybe a bit bigger, and a sort of stack of them either on your roof or on the ground, and they gather light from the sun, and then that's converted into energy which goes into your meter via an inverter and potentially a battery as well, and generates so it's the energy that you use in your house and all your appliances. So the benefits are, of course, that you reduce the amount of electricity that you need from the grid. So that will mean that you are using a lot more renewable energy, because solar is 100% renewable. And of course, you're reducing your costs because you're reducing your demand from the grid. So that also results in carbon savings. Your household carbon footprint will go down. You'll have those longer term cost savings. So you will, over time, recoup the cost of the original investment. And just finally, there are many things you can do to improve the energy efficiency in your home. But this is one of the things that's quite sort of simple and non-disruptive. It can happen over a day or a couple of days, and it's just, yeah, it's brilliant. Okay, next slide, I think. Wonderful. So something about the financials when you are considering investing in solar. So we say that sort of research tells us that 12 panels plus a battery on average costs around 10 to 12,000 pounds, and can generate between 3.5 and 4,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year, depending on things like the specification of the equipment that you purchase, and of course the fluctuations in the market, the roof accessibility and the scaffolding requirements that you might need, whether your existing home electrics are fit for purpose at the time of installation or whether they need any upgrades, whether the roof that you have at the time when you get your survey for the solar is fit, or if that also needs some work, you might need to replace rafters, etc. And of course, the roof orientation, the shading and the obstructions, that determines the generation capacity. So that's something on how much you might be looking at investing in as an upfront cost. But it will come down. You will get to see that payback. But it does all depend on how you use your system. So of course you've got the original start cost, your capital cost to take into consideration, but how much time it will take to pay back depends on how much energy you generate, And then of that energy that you generate, how much you're able to consume yourself versus how much you have to import from the grid to cover your need when there is no solar PV, or when your batteries run out if you have one. But also increasingly now, we have some great tariffs available, which Richard will tell you more about, that enable you to be paid back for your solar PV that you export to the grid. Not as it's not the same as the FIT tariff that was the original one, but we have the Smart Export Guarantee Scheme. So if you can optimize all these kind of variables, then your payback could be around 10 years, more or less, all depending on your own circs. And in terms of your estimated payback, your installer can give you some guidelines around that, but it's going to be really difficult to make that an exact figure because of these factors that are kind of more within your own control than your installer's control. So just to bear that in mind. So the electricity generation from your array of solar depends on the system size. So literally how many panels you have, and the power rating, so the wattage per panel. For example, I've got panels, they're 450 watt each, and I've got 12 panels. I've got batteries, I've got just under 6 kilowatts of battery. So that's absolutely brilliant in the summertime. It's I'd love to have another battery. It does, the more of a battery you have, the more you can make use of your own energy. But the amount of light that falls on your panels is the other factor, of course. Sounds obvious, but that determines how much energy you can generate. And obviously in the summertime, you've got the maximum window of light falling on your panels, whereas, you know, in the wintertime, sort of 21st of December, it's going to be the shortest day, shortest amount of electricity to generate. So there we are. It's demonstrated on this lovely graph. You can see on the left and the right of that graph, in January and December, got the least amount of energy being generated. But interestingly, you know, you'll sort of directly use sort of more of that energy that you're generating. We've got loads and loads of energy coming through in the summertime, and as you can see, it's pretty difficult to make the most use of that energy yourself. So some average figures that we've quoted here for you. If you don't have a battery, your self-consumption is going to be about 30% of the electricity from your panels, and the rest you'll export to the grid on average across the year. And when you do have a battery, and the more batteries you have, the more you can use, and the more energy of your own that you can use, it'll go up to around 60%, because you can store the energy that you're not using during the day, or indeed you can charge it at night, but that's another story which we'll come on to later, and use it at another time when it would be more expensive to draw down directly from the grid. Thank you. Okay, and this is a little quote that we had from one of our clients last year who installed solar, and they were just delighted with their system. They said they were actually self-sufficient for electricity, even at this sort of time of year, at least 3 days of one of the weeks in November. And they said that it has to be very gloomy or murky before they fail to get a reasonable amount coming in from the panels. And this surpassed their expectations. So, you know, we love hearing this kind of feedback. Okay, next slide, please. And so in terms of just sort of wrapping up now, I've got the last couple of slides that you're going to hear from me. To maximize your self-consumption or increase it, the things to do is sort of change your behavior in a sense, or think about how to match your behavior, your use of electricity to the energy that's being generated. So if the sun's shining, see if you can run your dishwasher or do some laundry. But also spread them out, so you're not trying to use too much energy at one time, which, you know, might not be possible. You might end up drawing down from the grid when you didn't expect to. And also thinking about an investment upfront to save down the line. So if you do include a battery, as we've mentioned before, you will manage to consume a lot more of that renewable energy that your panels have generated. Other things that you can think about, which Richard will tell you more about, is thinking about storing that energy as heat. So you can think about diverting excess electricity to your water heater. You can think about switching more of your, I suppose, your lifestyle appliances to electric, to sort of electrify your home more and more as you know, as the future comes into the present. That's what we'll all be doing. And so, you know, one brilliant thing to sort of do to maximize the benefits of solar is to have an electric vehicle, because you've got a brilliant sort of source to receive your energy, and a brilliant way of using a lot of energy into a big battery. And there's other options that are listed there as well. And just finally, just to note, your payback time is, of course, going to be affected by the cost of the upgrade versus the electricity saving. And I think this is my last slide now, before you get to hear from our colleague Richard. And so just a small slide here about the electricity costs and the payments. So you are going to be obviously still importing energy from the grid when you get solar, and importing energy from the grid is just, you know, your electricity bill. But when you get solar, you might start to think about that as your import tariff, because you'll also get another tariff, which is your export tariff. And so that is how much you get paid by your supplier for the excess energy that you generate that you can't use yourself. So you want to optimize both those things. You want to think carefully about who your electricity supplier is for both your purchasing of energy and also for who you're selling the energy back to. They can be different. You don't have to have the same supplier for both, but shop around. And for example, if you have a battery, a time of use tariff can be a really brilliant way of being able to make use of your battery even in the winter time, overnight. You can actually bring energy from the grid, which is cheaper and greener. Maybe when the wind is blowing, it's much cheaper to buy energy then, store it in your battery, and then use it during the day when your solar is perhaps not really generating much in the middle of winter, and the light is not so bright, and you can avoid those expensive daytime rates. So we've got a link there to a good comparison site, and at present, OVO and Octopus are offering the best tariffs. So we're not here to sort of suggest any particular suppliers, but we do find that these are the best at present, and you'll be hearing more about the details of all this very soon. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Claire. I'm going to hand over to Richard now. I think you're going to share your own slides, aren't you, Richard? So I'll stop sharing these and give you a chance to share your screen. Just to thank Keir as well. I can see Keir's been busy answering questions in the Q&A box. If you're not familiar with the Q&A box, Keir's answers move into the answered tab. So if you just click on the middle tab on that box, you can see what the answers are as they come through.
Great. Can you hear me and see my slides okay?
Fine for me, Richard. Thank you.
Excellent. I should just hide all the pictures. Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be with you, and I'm going to provide a bit of a Cumbrian case study that illustrates some of these pieces of technology and approaches that Molly and Claire have introduced. So I've entitled this "Bringing the Energy Transition to Your Doorstep." An introduction to smart home energy systems. So looking at the ways in which you can develop a smart home energy system in which solar PV is the key component. Right, so I'll start off by looking at it's really exciting this day and age. You can use solar PV basically to turn your house into a little bit of a mini power station, and you've got the opportunity to decide how to use that energy. Then looking at the ways to optimize the use of the homegrown energy through the use of solar diverters. Then looking at the different ways in which we can store energy, both using battery energy storage, but also using thermal energy storage, as Claire's alluded to. And then we're also talking about, you're still in a situation, certainly this time of year, when you're having to draw from the grid. But like with trains and anything like that, there's the cost of energy varies over time. So you can use time of use tariffs or smart tariffs to minimize the cost of your import. And then just finishing off with the issue of flexible demand, and having these kind of systems really future-proofs you and means that you're in a situation where you can take advantage of the changes we're going to see within the energy system as a whole. So starting off by looking at using solar PV to generate your own energy, I just want to give you a little bit of a personal Cumbrian case study. We had our system installed. It's in January of 2021. You can imagine in one of those waves in COVID and in some of the worst weather in a particular year. So, you know, hats off to all of the installers out there for going and working throughout some pretty shocking weather in Cumbria. But it's a relatively, probably what's now a medium-sized array, 12 panels, a peak power output of about 4.7 kilowatts. And fortunately, my wife had the prescience back in the day to buy a house which has a perfect south-facing roof. So that orientation was ideal for power generation. But just to give you some illustrations of how much power you can generate, this is the summer best case scenario. So this grey area is showing you when you're generating power. So you can see we're generating power from about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. This is a sort of indirect sunlight before the sun has even come around the front of the house. And this is the direct sunlight. It ramps up, it hits a maximum. This is known as clipping. That's actually that shows the maximum power that my inverter can kind of convert from DC from the panels to AC that I can use in the house. And then you can see it dropping off here. So we're generating for about 16 hours in the summer. And generating about 35 kilowatt hours of electricity. And that compares to an average household consumption in the UK is about 8 kilowatt hours. So you are generating far more power than you need. This shows a classic summer day with scattered clouds. So you can see we're generating for a similar amount of time, but you can see this chunks taken out of the generation. These dips are where cloud is passing over the house and over the array. But we're still generating energy. So just to sort of highlight that, you know, you can still generate energy even when clouds obscuring the sun. You don't need that direct sunlight. And even though we've got those scattered clouds on that day, we were still generating almost 30 kilowatt hours. But again, still in the midsummer. This is your worst case scenario in the summer, largely overcast day with one bright sunny interval here. And even in that worst case scenario, we're generating 7.7 kilowatt hours. So again, an equivalent amount of energy to the average domestic consumption. And then even in the winter, certainly when you've got kind of sunny conditions, you can still generate, again, you know, significant amounts of energy, even in Cumbria. So this is a sunny winter's day, 19th of December, but you can see you're only generating for about 6.5 hours. But again, in that situation, generating 11.2 kilowatt hours, but the sun is lower in the sky. So we're only generating a maximum of 2.4 kilowatts during the day. And you know, you'll get the opportunity to get these slides just in case you want to see, well, how much energy can you generate? Unsurprisingly, in Northern England, there's a pronounced variation according to season. You generate significant amounts of energy throughout the sort of like spring, winter, spring, summer, early autumn months. But obviously, as we get to this time of year, then the amount of energy is much less. But our estimated solar yield was about 4,400 kilowatt hours per year. And you can see we've actually, you know, generated about 15% more or so than that. So we talk sometimes about performance gaps, and there has been a performance gap in terms of our system has actually performed much better than the prediction for each of the full 3 years that we've had the system so far. In terms of cost savings, then the total production about 4,750 kilowatt hours per year. If we just take the price cap at the moment, that equates to a value of about £1,200 per year. So with an installation cost for the panels and that part of it of about £9,000, that suggests a payback time of about 7.5 years. But that would assume that you'd use all of the energy that you generate. And I'll come back to that in a moment. In terms of carbon savings, then I always go to people like Mike Berners-Lee. Mike Berners-Lee says there's about 5 tons of embedded carbon dioxide equivalent in that array. There's about 1.2 tons worth of carbon savings per year. So that'll be delivering carbon benefits in an array within sort of 3 to 4 years. So he certainly, and many other authors, see this as you know, absolute no-brainer when it comes to looking at domestic decarbonisation. So in terms of maximizing the use of your homegrown energy, it used to be relatively straightforward. You used to just have feed-in tariffs and you would just end up exporting that energy and you'd just send a meter reading, I think, was it 4 times a year, and you'd get a check for that. Didn't really matter about how you engaged or used that energy. But now that's been replaced, as Claire mentioned, by the Smart Export Guarantee. And that's typically associated with a much lower import tariff of anywhere between sort of 5 and 15 pence per kilowatt hour. So up until recently, it's very much been a switch in focus to trying to maximize your self-consumption. Because it's there's no point in you exporting energy only to have to then buy it back at, say, twice the cost, twice the price. But as I'll mention later on, it's if you have access to a cheap overnight tariff on these smart tariffs, then actually that it may not be the case that it's best to self-consume. But I'll save that for a moment. But solar diverters are devices that enable you to divert your solar energy into to different sort of energy demands in your home. So in this case, you can see the 4 kilowatts of solar are simultaneously being divided between the house, just 200 watts, and 2.4 kilowatts, which are going into the eddy. That's diverting energy into the hot water tank, and 1.4 kilowatts into the car. So these sort of devices will sort of simultaneously and dynamically divert and maximize the use of that generation between the different loads that you have in your house. So other brands are available, but My Energy is a sort of like a British company that specialized in this. So I've got a My Energy Zappy. So as they say, you can use your PV to charge your EV. In this case, 4 kilowatts is going straight into the car. I took this photograph earlier on. So far, since having this system installed, we've diverted 1,663 kilowatt hours worth of solar energy from the roof into the car, which equates to just over 6,000 miles worth of driving from that surplus solar. And they also produce the eddy. This is the opportunity for you to kind of divert surplus solar into your hot water tank. And that can enable you to, for example, reduce your use of gas or oil to generate your hot water production, which is another great way to deliver decarbonisation. That sort of moves us on to thinking about different ways in which you can use different types of energy storage to store that surplus solar in your home. So a lot of focus, and I'm sure a lot of the discussion will be about batteries. Relatively straightforward. You can have a domestic battery in a home. We've got a Tesla Powerwall 2, can store about 13.5 kilowatt hours worth of electricity. And it's relatively simple. If you've got surplus solar during the day, that gets stored in the battery. That's showing the green down here. And then in the evening, after the sun is set, you basically then use that stored surplus energy to run the domestic appliances, and then you can rinse and repeat. And so you can run essentially off grid for a number of days. But it's also about thermal energy storage as well. So you can end up with smart hot water tanks. So hot water tanks can be another great way of through things like those solar diverters in which you can store that surplus solar energy in your house. So when you're in the summer, then when you use this combination of solar diverters and solar storage, you can basically become self-sufficient for days, weeks, or even months, and your house can then become basically a net exporter of energy, basically helping to start to green the energy supply amongst your neighbours. So sort of looking at all of this, then this shows our total energy production for 2023, and the yellow here shows the amount we've used in the home, and the grey shows the amount we've exported. So you can see with these devices, we've got to the stage of 70% self-consumption of that electricity, and the remainder has been exported. But if we end up looking at our total energy use within the home, you can see that certainly when you get into the winter, we still need, say in this December, a very small fraction of our total energy demand was provided by the surplus solar. Actually, a lot of energy was then being drawn from the grid. So just talking about smart tariffs in that respect, we're all very familiar with tariffs. I remember growing up as a nipper, using the Economy 7 tariffs to heat up our hot water tank overnight. And these are some things which are becoming more and more important. So as I say, a bit like trains, are used to trains and other forms of transport being cheaper when you travel off peak. Well, similarly, if there's the opportunity to draw electricity overnight when demand is low, then you're in an opportunity when you can get energy for a much cheaper price. So in this case, for Octopus Go, rather than paying 25p per kilowatt hour, if you're drawing in this wee small hours of the morning, you can draw energy from 7.5p per kilowatt hour, whereas it's more expensive during the rest of the day. So you can see in this indication, we've pretty much imported all of our energy during that time period. So this can be really, really useful in the winter when the solar PV generation is limited, and you can use these same energy stores to charge up the energy with that off-peak electricity when the tariffs are really cheap. So if we think about using, again, the energy storage in the winter, this is a screenshot from the middle of the night, and I'm pulling 14 kilowatts from the grid, and I'm using that to, this is actually to charge up the hot water tank in this case. This is to charge up the domestic battery, and this is to charge up the car. And then the game is to try and make sure that you don't have to draw any more energy during the course of the day, and you make it to the next cheap off-peak window, and then you go through that situation of, again, drawing that cheap energy. So again, looking at this situation here, you can see in late autumn and into winter, almost all of our energy has been drawn overnight. So 99.5% of our electricity demand in that month was drawn off peak. So this is known as sort of like load shifting. So in these ways, you can benefit not just yourself, but you can benefit the broader energy system. And this is important for decarbonisation as well, because it's overnight in these wee small hours when we have more renewables on the grid. So we have a lower carbon intensity. So drawing from that time period is again associated with a carbon reduction as well. One thing that I've learned, and it gets quite complicated, but I think this is really important, is that your best strategy depends on using your system, depends on the balance between the value of your import tariff versus your export tariff. If your import tariff is greater than your export tariff, then it's best to maximize your self-consumption so as to minimize the cost of your import. But you will get minimal export income. But if your overnight import tariff, if your export tariff is greater than your cheap overnight import tariff, and that's commonly the case if you're in these overnight smart tariffs, then it's best to maximize your export even in the summer. Because for every unit you export during the day, for myself, I can export at 15p a kilowatt hour, but then I can import the following night at 7.5p per kilowatt hour. So I can import twice as much energy, or 2 units of energy per single unit of energy I export. So, that balance between your import and export tariffs will govern the best strategy to use. Worthwhile mentioning, there are some so-called dynamic time of use tariffs. These are things like Octopus Agile. These are probably not for the faint-hearted. The cost of electricity on the grid actually varies it varies every half hour. And these sort of dynamic time of use tariffs actually track this wholesale tariff. And it does mean that there can be situations when you've got lots of wind that the price actually goes negative, which means you've got the bizarre situation. In those cases, you can actually you can get paid for importing electricity from the grid. But conversely, if there's a lot of demand on the grid, then those prices can actually go really, really high. And as Claire has mentioned, there's some really useful guidance amongst organisations like Money Savings Experts and the Energy Savings Trust to provide detail on smart tariffs. That would be worth a whole session in its own right. So just kind of briefly to finish, and I'm conscious of time, we're moving to an energy system where, we regularly have situations now where we have 50 to 60% of our electricity is being provided by renewables. And the key to those kinds of our behavior in those situations is to have flexible demand. So this is where we can talk about demand side management. That's what we can do in our homes. So we can see, this is looking at offshore wind generation over the end of August, and you can see these dramatic variations in the amount of electricity that we're generating from offshore wind. And so we want to try and be drawing energy during times when it's abundant and reducing our use when those renewables are limited. So if we look at the energy use during the course of the day, then we have these typical spikes in energy demands, between, say, sort of 5 and 8 o'clock at night. And that's when energy is typically expensive and is generally carbon intensive. So if you've got batteries, something that they trialed last year, this is available for some, but not all batteries, was during those time periods when the grid is under real stress, you can program your battery to discharge to the grid. And last year, when they were trying this, you'd be paid £1.75p per kilowatt hour over your standard export rate. So discharging the battery for an hour made me £8.75, £8.75, and then you can draw overnight for 7.5p. So, you know, in that kind of situation, you could make a lot of money by sort of force discharging your battery to the grid. And we're looking at those sort of returning this winter. Conversely, if you're in situations where there's loads of electricity going and begging on the grid, then we're seeing increasingly numbers of times when there are basically these free energy sessions. And this is something that's been offered by Octopus. So when we had Storm Ashley blowing through the other week, there was actually an hour where electricity was free. So in that situation, if you've got these energy stores, you know, your hot water tank, your EV, your battery, you could basically fill up your stores for those hours, or you turn on various things in the house and get energy for no cost whatsoever. So just to kind of finish then, just to kind of confirm that, you know, solar PV does work in Cumbria. You can generate significant energy even in cloudy days, and certainly in the summer you can run off grid for days, weeks, and sometimes even months at a time. Electric energy storage can be crucial, can be provided in different forms. You've got domestic batteries, but don't forget also about thermal storage, particularly if you've got hot water cylinders already. Energy tariffs are key to optimizing the use of your system, and I've highlighted the different ways you can do this depending on the balance between your import and export tariffs. And, you know, we're seeing an emerging flexibility market that's going to be really important. So if you've got the ability to generate and store and then to decide when to import and export that energy, you're really in a situation where you can help yourselves, you can help the grid, and you can be part and parcel of that clean energy future. So I shall stop sharing there. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Richard. So helpful to see how you can really sort of squeeze every ounce of benefit out of solar systems by looking at the add-on technologies and looking at all of the different tariffs that are available. But I just wanted to stress that if that's a little bit overwhelming for you, just having solar panels and then not thinking about them anymore is also absolutely fine as a starting point, or even as the entire kind of lifetime with the solar panels, you'll still get lots of benefits. So it might be something that you can build towards where Richard is at. You can add on technology, you can look into tariffs, but please don't be overwhelmed and thinking that's the only way to get the most out of them. It's really kind of horses for courses, what suits you at your particular stage in your life and where you are with your thinking around home energy. I've got some more questions in the chat. We're going to move over to the question and answer now. Again, as I said, thank you very much to Keir, who's been writing away in the answers in the chat. So I'll go to the open questions. I might direct these at Chloe, as Chloe hasn't been quite as quick as Keir so far in writing answers. So I'm going to direct these to you, Chloe, and then Keir, please come in if you want to add something. So the first question is around if the budget is tight, can you install the batteries phase 1 and then PVs as phase 2 and link the two? If you only have a battery, can you take advantage of importing cheaper electricity overnight and exporting between 5 and 9 p.m? I think, Keir, please feel free to carry on typing. I can see you're typing, but Chloe, do you have thoughts on that question?
Yes, so we've done a couple of systems like this actually. So we've done a couple of systems where people have had, you know, they've got the property and they're not been able to install solar panels because of Velux windows or the roof is north facing. So what we have done is installed an AC charger and then a battery system. So what that essentially does is you charge the battery during the cheap nighttime tariffs, and then during the day you deplete the battery and then again charge it again in the night and deplete it through the day. As well with the budget, yeah, so we've done quite a number of systems where we have actually installed the solar PV and the inverter first, and then at a later date when you're ready we can add the batteries. That's no problem.
Thanks, Chloe. Is it right that unless you do the two at once you'll be charged the VAT on the battery? Is that still the case? Is that one of the implications of doing it at separate times?
So it was, but I think it was either February or March this year it changed to 0% VAT, which is brilliant news. Yeah, so it is 0%.
That's great to know. Fabulous. Is there anything you wanted to add to that one, Keir?
No, I think Chloe's got that one covered.
Okay, brilliant. Question 2 then. What sort of price are the batteries?
Oh, this is really, it's like asking what price is a car. It really depends on what size you go for off-road. So anywhere between, I would say anywhere between £1,500 up to 5,000. It really does depend on what brand you go for, and two, the size of the battery.
Thanks, Chloe. What about some of the ones that you sell, Kia? Is that similar prices?
Yeah, it just depends on how many kilowatt hours um what you want to install really. Um, and it depends on whether you want to add backup functionality as well. If you want to add a backup functionality to a battery system, that generally adds like another £500 to £1,000 sometimes, just because of the involved nature of installing that system and putting a conjure disc in the ground so that you've got an additional earthing point. So yeah, I mean anywhere from a couple of £1,000 and then up to a Tesla, which might cost you £6,500, £7,000.
And when you talk about the backup, is that to do with being able to use the battery in the power cut? Is that what you're referring to, or is that something different?
Yeah, so if the power, like for example, a Tesla would come with the gateway. So um, you buy in the obviously energy, they both come with something called a gateway, which is effectively just an automatic transfer switch. So when the grid goes out, it swaps you over onto battery power. But you also have to install a separate means of earth into the supplier's earth when you put those systems in, because you can't use the supplier's earth. You can't use the supplier's earth when you're off grid. You have to have your own means of earthing. And we just tend to find that earth rods don't give you a high enough reading when installed. And actually in South Lakes, you try and knock an earth rod in and you just hit limestone like 300 mil down. So we started using these conjure discs, which give you an extremely good ZE reading, and which means that all your MCBs, RCDs in the house will still operate. Yeah, that's about it.
Oh, that's helpful. So it's something bearing in mind that you won't automatically be able to use a battery in a power car. It is something extra that you need to make sure is dealt with at the time of installation.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Chloe, for the next one. I think we've covered the battery cost bit. The panels are the easy bit to see. Is everything else? Do you need a mini plant room? How big? How much space do all the other bits take up?
No, you don't. No, you don't need a mini plant room at all. If you're just going for a standard system, as in the inverter and batteries, you don't need much space. So, for example, we have got our inverter and battery outside. So I would say the battery and inverter, so they're kind of stacked up on top of one another. So we've got our inverter here, and then the battery sits below it. It sits about 5 foot high, and I would say maybe 2 foot wide. So no, you don't need a lot of room at all. We obviously, we would do a site visit and check spaces that you've got available. So if you've got a garage, if you've got a utility room, if you've got a spare cupboard, we've had people, put them in hallways, or as I say, we've got ours outside. Yeah, we can size it up. So no, you don't need a ton of space, but we do just need to make sure that it's obviously clear ventilation and check the cable run as well.
Great, thanks,
Yeah, I
Claire.
would say basically more and more often now. I mean, we install a lot of Tesla and we install a lot of Huawei. Both of those can be fitted outside because they have battery heating technology. So, they don't suffer from reduced rates of charge and discharge because of the cells getting cold. So, I mean, you can fit them on an outside wall. The one in my house is fitting on an outside wall. And so, yeah, you can utilize the space you've got out there as well.
Great, thanks, Kim. I think Claire's
One thing to mention is we don't really install them in lofts anymore. It's not regulations yet that you can't do it, but it probably will be within the next few months. And basically, firemen don't like you putting them in lofts because if there's a house fire and they come off the wall, that they'll end up on a fireman's head. So that's why they're sort of trying to get this to come in as a regulation to stop people putting them up there. It's not to do with the batteries themselves setting on fire. It's more to do with the danger to the firemen if they're in the building and the roof collapses in. Yeah.
That's useful to know. Thanks, Kia. Claire's typed an answer in there as well, which is very similar. So I'll let people read that. The next question, which Richard's already written an answer to, is about are panels becoming more efficient and do power ratings vary? Chloe, do you want to add to what Richard said there?
Yeah, Molly, I don't know whether I'm seeing where are you seeing the answers?
So if you click on the middle of the
Questions.
Q&A box where it says answered, can you see that
Oh,
tab in
goodness
the
me.
middle?
Yes.
And they move
Yeah.
into there as soon as someone types an answer.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, so let me just find this question.
It's towards the bottom.
Yeah, 500 quid's about right.
So I think that's the other one, isn't it, Keir? That's about the hot water diverters. But the question we were on was, are panels becoming more efficient and do power ratings vary?
Yeah, they do actually. So I think it was maybe last year our most popular panel was sitting at 390 watt, I think it was. And now we're installing 455 watt panels. They're definitely the most popular at the minute. Again, it just depends on the space that you've got available. So for example, our property here, we've got not a lot of space at all. We've got 5 panels on the front, 5 panels on the back, and I think we have 390 watt panels, whereas now if we'd have had them installed now, we would opt for the higher wattage panels. So yeah.
Richard,
Yeah, so I mean, when I started installing in a long time ago now, we were installing 180 watt panels that were less than 12% efficient. And now most panels are sort of 22, 23% efficient. That's what, 14 years later. So, I mean, generally every month they go up 5 watts, and, every year they go up 1%, it seems to me, in terms of efficiency. But yeah, there's actually, there's various differences between the panels you can get as well. For example, Eco panels are usually 23% efficient, where but your Jinkos and your Trinas and the rest of them might be 21, 22. But your Ecos are probably still double the price of those. So it's just kind of a case of you buy in when you buy in, and then you will see that panel wattages will go up, over the next couple of years, but you've just got to jump on at some point, really.
thanks, Keir. Richard, did you want to add something about your reply to that question?
Yeah, I can't help, I absolutely agree in almost everything I talk about that energy efficiency is absolutely critical. But I think this is one area where I'd say don't get too hung up about the efficiency of panels. And that respect, it might be a relatively low efficiency, but that can be really important in your car. If you have got a combustion engine car, they're between about 18 and 25% efficient, which is particularly problematic when you think I'm sort of wasting 80% of the energy and the cost of the fuel is so expensive. But remember that solar panels are harvesting energy, which is free. There's zero marginal cost for that sort of like energy. So anything you're able to kind of capture is energy that is costing you absolutely nothing. So yeah, it's kind of everyone has sort of said, and with the cost of panels kind of reducing over time and the amount of energy they can generate, increasing over time, then they just work so well even in somewhere like Cumbria.
Especially in the last couple of years, like I've noticed, just hugely, they've just got hugely better, especially in like low light in the last few years. Generation figures for panels might have only gone up a few percent, but their ability to deal with low light and also to deal with shade as well. They've started being able to deal with shade better without the use of optimizers. So, the world is turning. It's really coming on.
So just to clarify, then, when we're talking about 25% efficiency or whatever the number is, are we talking about the energy in the light? How much of that is converted to electrical energy? Is that what we mean by that percentage? Okay, thank you. I think next question, I think we've answered that around how much do hot water diverters cost, about £500. And Keir, you said that feels right to you as well. Moving back to the open ones, we've got a question here. I'm hoping to build a replacement for an ancient conservatory and which would be more of a garden room with a slated roof. Can you give some advice on something not yet built? The starting bit, though, would be the existing meter, definitely not smart. Who wants to take that one?
Well, you have to have a smart meter to access any of these smart tariffs. And, one thing to say about smart meters is that they aren't very smart, to be honest. They're like, you probably want, we are getting issues with people around here where they get them fitted if they're in a cellar or they're in, around Silverdale, we get a lot of issues just because it seems to be a bit of a black spot. But it's a good idea to get those smart meters fitted and make sure they're working before you have the solar installed, because you will not be able to get access to Octopus's smart tariffs without a working smart meter. I mean, not all is lost if you can't access a smart tariff. You can still have a meter fitted and go on to an economy 7 tariff. But it's, you will only get paid the smart export guarantee for export rather than Octopus's higher lux export price. So yeah, you don't want to get caught out with that one.
So would there be any other considerations if it was a garden room with a slated roof around perhaps the weight or the suitability of that kind of room? Does it really come down to how that room's constructed?
I mean, in general, any room that is constructed, so if it's going to be you work in conjunction with your builder, let them know there's going to be solar panels on the roof. I mean, solar panels are generally lighter than slates or tiles anyway. So you just work in conjunction with them as you're having it built. You probably would have integrated panels because that would save you on tiles and slate. Yeah, and the other thing I guess to point out about if your smart meter is not smart, what if you are going to have a smart meter fitted at the same time as you're asking them to put that in, I would ask them to put a supply isolator in as well, just because that's really good for us as installers. It means we don't have to pull the supplier's fuse, which we're not really supposed to do actually. But they also won't come out and pull it. So, we end up pulling it, and some of them were installed in the 60s, and they can crumble in our hands or whatever. So not particularly safe. So if you can ask them to put a double pole isolator in at the same time they put a meter in, that's always makes things easier for the installers.
Thanks, Kieran. I guess the other thing is just if that's a single story room, just to make sure it's not overshadowed by either your own building or neighbouring buildings if it's single story. I'm going to move on to the next one. Question from Karen. If you had to choose, would you choose the Give Energy All in One or a Tesla Powerwall 3? Anyone got an opinion on those two options?
We've installed a lot of the Give Energy systems. I won't lie, we've had I think the first 3 or 4 Give actually came out to site because they had a faulty batch of batteries. Have you had the same, Kia? We've had a couple of problems.
I mean, I don't think those two are in the same ballpark for quality. One's a premium and one's a budget. I mean, yeah, the Give Energy is basically a copy. It's a bad copy of the Tesla Powerwall 3. It's not that much cheaper either, really. Customer service as well, Chloe. It's like for Give Energy, it can be hard work sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a little hit and miss. Obviously not from a end user's point of view, probably from our point of view. But I would say that, so we've done 2 more prior to our previous complications, and touch wood, we've had no problems with them. It's worked well. We've had the support from Give. So yeah, I guess if you've got the budget, I would go for the Tesla. But if you haven't got the budget, you could have a look at Give, or there is alternatives like the Stig Energy that you've mentioned, Kia. They seem good. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next question: how can I verify that the panels come from sustainable sources, and are there any checks on licensing for registration of installers? I can take the latter one. We've, as CAFs, we've looked at the sort of registration for the installers that we work with, so it's mainly the MCS accreditation for installing renewables. Also, you'd really look for kind of qualified electricians as well. I'm not absolutely familiar with those certifications. Should I come to you, Kieran, Chloe, for the certifications or accreditations that you've got as organisations?
Yeah. So it's quite thorough process. So obviously you've got to be MCS accredited. The panels and fixings that we install as well, they've all got to be MCS accredited. So we'll be able to apply certificates or an MCS number so you can check those products out. You need an insurance-backed warranty. So we're registered with HICE. There is our also REC, who you can be registered with. You obviously need all your electrical qualifications, your battery storage qualifications. Yeah, I think that's it really.
I mean, in terms of, yeah, Chloe's answered sort of the installer side of it. You know, it's there's the MCS is basically like a book of how to install solar to an acceptable level, and we have to show that we can follow that to become members, and we're checked on it every year. In terms of whether the panels come from sustainable sources, I mean, some of the Chinese manufacturers have been caught in the past with having dodgy supply chains. I mean, they all now promise us that their supply chains are kosher, but there are some European suppliers who have always, so there's some made in Urina, made in Spain. They've always prided themselves on their supply chain, and there's a couple of other suppliers out there that have always prided themselves on their supply chain as well, and have never been found out or have had to, go out and prove their supply chains. Those panels generally are a little bit more expensive, probably for that reason.
Thank you. Richard, have you got something to add?
Yeah, I just popped something. I see other sort of like the same question emerge in the chat. So I put a link in there I was thinking there'd be organizations like Ethical Consumer that will provide a bit more guidance if you wanted to kind of like look at the supply chains related to different panel manufacturers. But I'd also, kind of say it's also important just to kind of think that, well, just in situations of not letting no technology is a panacea, but not letting the perfect be the energy of the good, being the enemy of the good. It's worthwhile bearing in mind that if you think about solar panels, I mean, it's worth pausing and thinking you generate all this power from something with no moving parts that will last for 25 years. The principal component of which is silicon as a semiconductor. It's made out of sand. And it's worthwhile thinking, well, if we're not sort of generating the power through the solar panels, then what's the alternative? They really are a sort of like a remarkable sort of like cleaner technology, and I guess one of the most, one of the simplest technologies that we can think of within the broader energy transition.
Yeah, they are remarkably reliable. I mean, I've been back to panels that were fitted in the 90s that are still working. And most panels are warranted to be 80% as efficient after 25 years or 30 years. And they're finding that these panels are outperforming those warranties. So yeah, they are a modern marvel, really, solar panels.
Great, thanks, Kia. I noticed that's the next. I'm just going to skip a question, move on to that next question just for a second. So life expectancy for panels, so we've got 25 to 30 years. Inverter and battery, that's slightly shorter, isn't it? What would be the expected lifespan of those?
Well, your batteries generally 6,500 cycle warranties. A lot of people offer that. Tesla offer a throughput warranty, so that's as many charge cycles as you want for 10 years, which is a better warranty actually. SIG Energy also offer that warranty. Huawei also offer that warranty. Like a cycle warranty, throughput warranty means you can just put as many cycles as you want through it, which you might want to do. It's sort of those premium companies offer those warranties for throughput because they're confident that you can charge that battery off grid at night and discharge it into the grid in the daytime, and it's still going to be fine to do that after 10 years, basically. Other warranties will just be cycle warranties, but 6,500, I think, is something like 18 years or something. Inverters are generally warranted for 10 years these days. And in my experience, some of them last 10 years, some of them last 15 years, some of them last 20 years. It's just, just sometimes it just depends on the component. You get the odd component that goes, but I would definitely look to get a warranty for at least 10 years for an inverter. And if you do better than that, you've done well. And just, sort of factor that into the equation when you get in the system.
Great, thank you. The question I skipped, I think, has been answered about, do you do in-roof panels as well as panels that sit on top of the roof? And I think the answer is yes from both of you. Is that right? You have the option
Yeah.
of either. So if you're thinking about re-roofing, it's good to think about that early if you wanted to have the in-roof system, because it saves you the money on the roof covering. Moving on.
Also, I mean, something to mention about that is I get a lot of people who are doing re-roofs because they can put panels on, and the whole cost of the thing is 0 VAT rated. You know, if you're having roof works done and that roof is going to then have panels on, and there's no reason why that you can't have a re-roof done at 0% VAT, as long as, if we're taking a chimney down, that's not going to be 0% VAT. You'd have to pay 20% for that, but your scaffolding will be 0% VAT, and any roof where the panels are going will also be 0% VAT rated. So it's actually quite a good time to, have your roof have a re-roof effectively.
Great, thanks, Kia. Next one. How many years is it before a panel becomes so inefficient that it should be replaced? So I think that the answer previously was around guaranteed to be 80% efficient, or 80% of its power generation for 25 or 30 years. So it's a long old time before they become too inefficient to be worthwhile. Next question. I have economy 7 meter and 3 storage radiators, about 11 kilowatts in all. Could these be used as storage? Can you link to electric storage heaters? I haven't heard that one before.
Well, if you've already got sorry, go on, Chloe.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say I've not heard that one before, so you might be best on this.
Economy 7 and storage. I mean, storage heaters and batteries, and the amount of power that a storage heater uses will deplete a battery pretty rapido, really. Batteries work well with air source because you have a 1-to-4 ratio or 1-to-3 sometimes ratio of heat to electric. So, you put 1 kilowatt of electric in, you get 3 kilowatt hours of heat out. Whereas with a storage heater, it's pretty much, it's probably just over 1. So, that's why a storage heater uses economy 7, basically. And you would just probably continue to do that. You would probably continue to charge your storage heaters on the economy 7 rate, but you might have a battery at the same time that would charge up at that same rate that you would then use to power the house the next day. But I don't think you would ever really use the battery to charge a storage heater, if you see what I'm saying. The amount of kilowatts that it takes to power a storage heater is significant. You need a lot of battery power to do that with.
Thank you, Richard. Did you want to add something to that?
Just agree with Keir that I think, I could imagine a situation where, for example, if you had an EV or something like that and you had access to a cheap overnight tariff, that, you can use that cheap overnight tariff for anything. And the storage heaters themselves would just be another form of energy storage. So you could charge them up overnight on that same sort of tariff. But yeah, I think the really interesting stuff is then it's that combination of things like solar PV batteries and an air source heat pump, because I've got an air source heat pump down in a property down in Stoke. I've still got as a bolt hole. I'm getting a sort of seasonal coefficient performance of 4. So every unit of electricity you put in, I'm getting 4 units of heat out. And so you can imagine in situations where someone's got a time of use tariff, they're paying 7p a kilowatt hour to charge up that battery, but then you're getting 4 units worth of heat out of that. So your cost per unit of heat then is less than 2p.
Yeah.
So things that combination, of course, things kind of get quite sort of expensive and quite sophisticated, but there is the prospect then of really driving sort of like the cost of space heating demand down to to really, really low levels.
And actually, Octopus now have a tariff specifically designed for air source heat pumps, and we get a lot of clients for in the new builds who are going to put air source in, and Octopus's tariff Cozy has 2 cheap periods. So it has a cheap period just before people get up in the morning, so you can charge your battery then, but you're also running the air source at that time. And then the battery, then when the cheap period ends, it goes back to standard rate. The battery runs the air source through that period. Then you have another cheap period just before the premium hours of 4 to 7, where electricity costs a lot of money, where you charge your battery up again. And so then when it gets to 4 o'clock, you have a fully charged battery that you can use to then run the air source through, through the premium hours and into the evening, and hopefully get you through to the, as far as you can, basically, before you get back into that standard period again.
Thanks, Kate. Claire, you've got your hand up too.
Hi, yes, I'm just aware that Tom had a question. He had two questions, and I answered the first half, but the second half is sort of probably needs answering, but it's moved into the answered section. And the second question is, are there obvious ways for a layperson to know whether their current electrical wiring system is up to scratch? I have a modern consumer board, but recent work suggests domestic wiring is at least 25 years old. Would rewiring be needed before a solar PV fit? I just wondered if that...
Not necessarily. You can have an electrical installation certificate done prior to an install. That'll give you an idea of how, what sort of condition your electrical installation is in. But I mean, generally, we install a new board for our kit anyway, and we'd sort of leave the older side of the installation alone. So you'd have the new board there that would have a surge protection device in it to protect the kit that you're having installed. And then it's just feeding back into your system as is. So, as long as everything's okay on that side of things, then you wouldn't necessarily, it's the same electricity going through it as is going through it now, so if there's a problem with your electrics now, the solar's not going to make it any worse, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, if you're concerned about the condition of your electrics, just have an EIC done, and then yes, a rewire is always a good idea if it's in poor condition. But an old electrical installation doesn't necessarily pose any risks if it was installed correctly in the first place, and if the installation of the wires in the house is still doing its job.
Thank you, Keir. There was a question from the person who asked the original question about Tesla batteries. If you don't want to buy one from Elon Musk, which is could be your preference to not shop there, any good high quality alternatives? I can see you're typing, Chloe. Do you want to?
Big energy.
Sorry, are we just going to have a little type out then? Yeah, so like Kia's just mentioned, SIG Energy. We haven't actually installed a SIG unit yet, but we're registered to go on a course with them. And they look like they're going to be, really good. So hopefully we'll be offering them soon. We've done a hell of a lot of systems with Solax, Fox, and Lavoltec as well. All three, we obviously, you have teething issues, and not every system is perfect, as in, some might need updates when we're on site and whatnot, but customer service is fantastic. We've not had any complaints. Everything is, kind of done as it's said. So yeah. We've also installed the Libby system. I think we've done about 4 or 5 of them. So they're by My Energy, who Richard mentioned. And that's a very good piece of kit as well.
Great, thank you, Chloe. I think there was another question which I think Richard might have answered. Typed an answer. Do they need? Oh, Claire, I think typed an answer. We've got 2. Sorry. The first one was: can solar panels be installed on a metal roof? Richard, I think you've said yes. Any other answers on that, Chloe and Keir? Any problems with metal?
Yeah, they can. I mean, solar panels can pretty much be installed to any type of roof. There's a system will have been invented for it. Seamed roofs or trapezoidal roofs, flat roofs with felt on, or any other membrane. There's always some sort of mounting system there for them to be installed to.
Great, thank you. And the other question was about, do panels need washing, which Claire has answered. Claire, do you want to?
I'd say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Generally, like after a few years, they do get to a point where they could do with a bit of a scrub. A lot of more window cleaners these days are starting to offer that service, and they'll have a big long pole with a spinning brush on the end, and sort of get the worst of the it's like a build-up starts to happen at the bottom of the panel that you can only really get off with a proper wash after a few years.
So not
Or
very
if you
regular, once a year or
no,
once.
it's not something you would do I mean, it's just not feasible or economical really to have it done, every time your window cleaner comes round, unless it's extremely cheap. But you just probably every few years, or if you live in a particularly dusty place, maybe every year, just to keep them clean enough so that you're not losing too much efficiency.
Richard?
Just an observation in terms of, I don't know, it'd be interesting kind of from the installers whether they get that sense that some need less cleaning than others. I mean, my sort of panels I've not cleaned at all since I've had them, and it seems that they get a bit more sort of dusty and there are a few more bits of bird poo over the course of summer. But by
Yeah.
the course of the winter season, a good
If you
few
look at them though, Richard,
heavy
you'll
rain
find how long they've been in for.
since January 2001.
Yeah, if you look at them
2021,
closely,
sorry.
you'll see some residue on them that you can't see from the floor, and it
Yeah.
like a good wash will clean that off, and it will make a significant difference. Like the other thing is, if they're near trees or they're under trees
Yeah.
or they're in a particularly sort of, they don't get a full day of light. It's like a shaded install. You will get more sort of algae growing on them. And also, if they're near trees, sometimes you'll get quite a lot of sap on them, and that starts to build up as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it's a feasible thing, it doesn't cost the earth. You can leave them, like you say, you can leave them, and the rain we get in Cumbria, it does give them a good clean off. But if it's not too expensive, then and it's a feasible thing to do every few years, giving them a wash will sort of give you a little bump in efficiency.
Cool.
Great,
Thanks for the
thank you.
advice.
We've got one last question, unless anybody wants to type in another one. We already have an EV charger for the car. Would this connect to any system, or do charge points and batteries need to be from the same manufacturer? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, they can connect to any system. Yeah, I mean, you've got like systems like My Energy that they will have. So what Richard's got, they have a system where you can have a charger from them and a immersion controller from them and a battery from them. They'll all work together, and you can prioritize which one you want for the energy to go to first over the other devices. But if you don't have a My Energy and you just have a bog standard car charger, that there's no problem with putting a battery or a solar PV installation in. The charger will still work, and they'll both still charge from the grid successfully. And if you're charging the car during the day and it's sunny, the sun will still go into that. It will any of the excess from the being generated by the solar will still go into the car when it's charging, or it will draw from the battery as well. So yeah, it doesn't matter too much that you've got different brands.
Would it mean that you can't use a sophisticated technology that senses which one to optimize when? So like the apps that Richard was showing, I don't know whether Richard, you were going to come in this question as well.
Yeah, just share our own journey. We used to have a pod point charger, but I think some chargers are smarter than others. So that pod point charger, when it was running, it would just pull the full 7 kilowatts. And so that there's the house will just see that as a load, and any surplus solar will go to satisfy that load, but the remainder will be pulled from the grid. And of course, you might have an EV where in the EV you can reduce the charge rate. But the reason that we kind of swapped that out for the My Energy Zappy at the time was it was at a time when the focus was on self-consumption. And they have a mode where you can set it on where you just say just maximize any use of surplus solar, and you could just leave all day, go out for a bike ride, and as long as you had more than, I think it's about 1.4 kilowatts of surplus solar, it would then just switch on the charger, it would charge, then if it went behind a cloud it would switch off again. And it was just so it would just maximize the use of any surplus solar you had in that day, and it was a bit of a fit and forget. And then you had various different modes, from just charge on surplus solar alone to blend that surplus solar to the grid, to then just sort of charge fast from the grid over line. So it's just a sort of smarter piece of technology.
it's really good for people who are retired, actually, the Zappy, I find, because, you know, the way that, and it's a very green way to fill your car with energy rather than, you're not doing it from the grid overnight. But if you're retired and you have one of these new EVs that can do 350 miles on a single charge, it's not necessary for you to come home, plug that in, and then if you've taken 5 or 10% out of the battery, you don't necessarily have to charge that car straight back up to 100% again. You can wait a couple of days for the sun to come out and charge that car up. And I find we have clients who'll, for they'll do hundreds of miles, thousands of miles over the summer. That they've got directly just from solar generation, as Richard was showing earlier in his graph.
Yeah, I mean,
So yeah, the Zappy's the best for that as well. Yeah, it was the original, and it's sort of the one we still fit. We don't often fit the Libby battery, but we fit the Eddies and we fit the Zappies. Alongside the Teslas or the Huaweis or whatever we fitted, and they work well.
Richard?
And I think there is something that, there's certain things that put a smile on your face, and sort of like driving around in using power that, you've generated off a solar array off your roof just make you smile. And just to kind of share an anecdote there, which I think sort of puts, we can talk about kilowatt hours, but it's difficult to kind of can translate into something meaningful. When I was kind of focusing on the self-consumption, I remember just a sunny weekend in the summer. And I work part-time down at Kew University in Stoke, so it's about 135 miles. So I drove back on the sort of like the Friday evening away, plugged the car in just on that sort of mode where it's just charging on surplus solar. And on the Monday, I could, 2 days later, I can just drive. I drove back down to Kiel just on surplus solar that was generated from 12 panels on the roof. You thought I've generated enough power from those panels on the roof that was completely free to drive a 1.7-ton car 135 miles back to Stoke-on-Trent, which kind of, sort of it all to me.
And that's not really even that. It's not even, those batteries will be 70 kilowatt hours or what have you. And, a 4 kilowatts PV system will do 30 kilowatt hours on a summer's day, So if you've got 8 kilowatt hours of solar, it's the amount of power those systems will put out on a summer's day is staggering, Your battery, realistically, most people's batteries are charged by 11 o'clock in the morning in the middle of summer, and their water's hot by 11:30, and then it's charging the car, and that's done by early afternoon, and then you're exporting into the grid. So yeah, you can get some power out of a good sized PV system.
Brilliant. I'm going to draw it to a close on that really positive comment about how wonderful these systems are. I think we've hopefully answered all your questions. If you feel we haven't, or you've got more questions, please do email us. You can email Claire on the solar@cafs.org.uk email address. And if we can't answer it, we'll direct it to Chloe or Keir or Richard and get back to you. We've talked a lot about EVs as well in the last half an hour or so. We also had a webinar on electric vehicles just a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to know more about that, please do watch that webinar as well. I think, Claire, perhaps we could add the link to the EV webinar as well when we send out the slides. So that's it for us. I hope you found that useful. Thank you so much for attending and for staying through till 8:30. Thank you so much to our panelists, to Keir and Chloe and Richard, for joining us and helping to answer everybody's questions. So thank you, everybody. Good night. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.